Series of 3 sessions. The first one we did was just kind of like brainstorming and ideas. The second one we did was to kind of help the designers get to know the community get to know the designers. This one is basically a planning session to see if we are going to do something in terms of having community user experience design teams. Sort of what might work and what action items could we take for this cycle. Moving in that direction.
So there's a follow-up about the idea of having kind of like user experience themes to workflows basically for a stream of work with the community. Yeah.
So it's kind of a community project, but I'm not sure how to get that piece started. Oh. That's why I brought you into the fishbowl.
Look at me.
Would this be something that we'd run by the tech board or the community council, do you think? Which would make more sense?
So I think the best way, I mean, maybe the design team would do some sort of blog post and then we'd put that over on the fridge, but it would be some sort of blog post asking for feedback from the community, saying you guys are wanting to get involved, putting together your proposal for, I guess this would be the proposal we talked about on Monday, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think just describing what the project is, and then yeah, we'd cross-post that on Fridge, get that on the Ubuntu Weekly News, and just put it out there for the community as the first step. I don't know necessarily that we need to get councils or anything involved. I mean, we could, I'm not sure. It sounds like it just needs to go out to the community somehow.
Yeah. It seems like what we're lacking right now is kind of who would be on the community team. So give a chance for people to hear more about the idea.
But yeah, those are the two big, I mean, the Fridge and the Weekly News, those are the big ways that even the community council gets in contact with the rest of the community. So maybe tossing the ideas out there first.
And someone alert the journalists.
And you can just, once you have a blog post, you can just grab me on IRC or something, so I'm on the news team, so I can get that cross-posted.
So I guess we should list these kind of scenarios, these kind of themes, and then we should, with the community, prioritize them and see if something can.
Yeah, so if anyone, it picks up interest for anyone. Yeah.
So I guess we're mostly here now. I was somewhat disturbed this week to learn that some of the things that we've been particularly hounded on the most by the public and by the community and by reviewers, pieces of the UI they might have been complaining about the most, that you get a sense that their complaints or comments or even very nice bug reports might have fallen on deaf ears. These are sort of flashpoints reasons why we're having meetings like this. And it's come to my attention that some of these things might be pieces of the interface that even most of the developers don't agree with, but that have been sort of declared to be as such by Mark. And I'm worried about that concept, and I don't necessarily think we're going to prevent Mark making executive fiats, but I would like it to be at least known which ones are that way and which ones are actual, decisions that are still up for debate, right? And so,
I think we have a design process which includes also Mark, but it's also evidence-driven. Yeah. So any data that we collect with user testing is relevant. We don't do it just for the sake of it.
Because I mean, there's this worry, right? Like if I have something I would like to complain about, like say maybe I think the applications available for download in the application lens is a useless feature. How do I get it changed? Do I present to you data that users aren't using it? Do I present an argument? Do I say, oh, the community is all about this? And then is it because we've sort of made it a bit opaque to people, and then they.
With the evidence about the problem first. We don't need the solution.
Right.
First evidence about the problem. And once the problem is defined, we can eventually explore solutions also. That of the community. But first we need to define the problems, and there should be evidence about it.
Right.
Yeah, because there is a deeper issue, and that is the way feedback is often given. You know, it doesn't matter who decided on the feature. The way feedback is often given is in terms of is a very developer-centric way. It's like it's basically the idea of here's a patch, which is, you know, here, I dislike this button, I dislike this set of pixels, I dislike, so it's like, I want to patch this button, whereas the way design feedback, just design process works is actually more user journey, user experience.
Right.
So it would be almost like finding a new way to have the conversation, where instead of I hate this button, it's what's the user journey you were working on? Okay, explain that to me. So here's my user journey and how my user journey differs from the one that you were working on.
Briefly, I think that would help reframe the conversation in a way such that anyone who feels emotionally invested in the current status wouldn't be so dug in necessarily, right? Because there's been some worry about, you know, some hostility, and part of it might be when all you see is complaints, getting defensive about the current design or whatever is sort of a natural reaction. And defensiveness in general isn't really conduciveness to good design.
I mean, I don't want to be defensive of anything. Everything is under discussion. You know? You just need to have the right tools to judge things. You know, for us, you know, we do user testing. You know, we try to to explore as broad as possible. But you know, definitely there's so much of data that we are missing that we could get. So if the community can help us on collecting that data, for us, you know, it's really valuable.
Yeah, and would then provide fuel to any argument you would like to make, you know, real or hypothetical. So yeah, I see around the room some heads slowly nodding and in somewhat agreement, somewhat skepticism, and somewhat I don't want to discuss it, but you know.
Yeah, but these are personal opinions, you know. Yeah. You cannot be so, you know, connected to the solution. You need to be, you know, a bit more, think about, you know, the process, think about the people, you know, you're trying to design for. You cannot be so attached to the solution, unfortunately.
The other somewhat concerning thing I've heard over the weekend from private sources is sometimes Mark might use the word "the royal we." You know, we wanted this, and it was more than I wanted this sort of thing. And I'm not sure that's true, but
there is a high-level vision, which, you know, can be shared, cannot be shared. But you know, if you talk about details and about the solutions, that's a different discussion.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the community feedback would be a lot more productive if we're, you know, talking about, you know, more empirical data. You know, we have this vision and it's sort of broad and something not many people would disagree with, and then we have empirical data about, you know, which things promoted.
We're doing our best to validate things. We can definitely do better, and we're trying to do better anyway. So.
Yeah. There was a phrase I heard through one of these journalist reports in the comments of that it's complaint-based design is not necessarily productive, right?
It was interesting. I don't know if Karen Sandler's in the room. She mentioned to me yesterday, she's the executive director of the GNOME Foundation, and she's from sitting in on a session yesterday. She was saying, it's interesting to hear about designers being demotivated and designers feeling like they're under attack, because we get the exact same thing in GNOME. The designers feel, it's like, so in some sense, this is, I think it's a broader problem that free software communities are facing in terms of how do we as developers engage with designers in a healthy, productive way that makes them feel inspired to work on what they're working on. We've kind of not noticed the fact that because we've hired a bunch of designers, we've maybe not noticed the fact that we kind of never solved that problem from 4 years ago of how do we engage with designers in a way that pulls them in. I don't know if you have any perspectives.
Well, I mean, like in order to bring in new designers that you necessarily don't hire on a payroll, it's so the way we have we're currently doing this in GNOME, or currently, well, always. I mean, like there are definitely a lot of designers who are on payrolls for different companies, but there are also a lot of designers who are not on payrolls, who are just doing it for the fun of it. And I think a very important part of that is transparency. So like being really crappy at keeping secrets, basically. And this is, of course, true in the Mozilla community as well. Like you show the designs early and making sure that you treat your designers, whoever they happen to work for, like if it's for themselves or for your company, in a very similar way, which is of course hard if you're working on more secret projects, but it's definitely something to consider, like how early do you present things and stuff like that.
But do you have trouble with, let's say, just volunteer designers? And I'm not talking about the communication between the volunteers, but do you have trouble with them in the sense of engaging with the developers in the project and feeling like there's an understanding of the difference between the design process and the development process?
I don't know, like I think especially in the GNOME project, we have been blessed with the fact that we have very geeky designers who would more or less be able to program themselves. So they know about the inner workings, to some extent at least. But I mean, like I've certainly seen like good and bad situations. So for years and years, different people have been trying to redesign Nautilus to make it not sucky. This was hard because like a lot of people came along and said like, hey, here's my design. This is how it looks like. I'm not going to explain it in too much detail right now, but like this is how it should be. And the maintainers of the software would go like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. I have no idea of your merits and where you're coming from and how we should deal with it. And I have no way to trust you, basically, because I don't know you. But this spring, Alan Day, one of our former volunteer community designers, now on payroll because it was good, started like really engaging with the Nautilus developers and like getting to know them, filing bugs for every single little thing, like totally negotiate all the time. But it's hard. It's hard in general, like getting the proper reputation in order for the developers to actually trust your judgments. And I mean, like that's with everything. Like you have an easy way to get your code patches reviewed if the main developer trusts you as well. I mean, like, you know, so it's not too different between actual wireframe mockups and code pieces, if you see what I mean.
I think it becomes difficult if you know, user experience wants to be holistic, so you are kind of relying on different bits to be implemented. Actually, some of them are missing just because you know, the developer didn't feel like.
I know Nautilus is one of the pieces that's been mentioned several times by the Unity designers. As this is something. Wow, I wish this were better designed, better integrated, better. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a hard process. I mean, like it's definitely like getting, yeah, like really getting into. Well, getting to know the maintainers and knowing why the decisions that have been taken for the interface in the past have been that way. So you need to know the back history of why it is like it is today and how you can change that in a good way. And I think like smaller pieces at a time for software like that is a good way to do it.
I think a good, strong design team, though, requires diversity. You know, I've come from a development background, so, you know, I find it easy to engage with developers. You know, but you know, UX, you know, in terms of being holistic, you also have visual designers. You know, people coming from a, you know, a psychology background can provide insights that, you know, someone coming from a development background wouldn't have. Yeah. So, you know, I think, you know, we need to try to engage with a diverse design team. I think that's something.
And I mean, like, also talking to developers is like, part of it is like teaching them why the design is good, and like teaching about like specific design heuristics.
So do you have any tips on how to gain reputation from a designer to engineer?
You said like, I did this and this and this and this, and these are obviously good pieces of software that are well designed.
Do you have an example? Like, how did you get involved with the Thunderbird team?
Oh, I got hired. So, but how I got involved with Firefox is by that I did a lot of icons for several years. I built up a reputation of making good icons on Linux. And at some point in time, Alex Farberg said, like, we want to make a good product for Linux. How should we do it? Like, what should our visuals look like? So they approach, the group of GNOME icon designers, basically.
But icons is something that does have a critical impact on the user experience. You know, if you were designing, you know, a launcher or something more, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely.
People criticized. Do you see what I mean? An icon doesn't, you know.
No. It's more very visual, and you can see if it looks good or not. And yeah, it's hard. It definitely is. I really don't have any really good answers.
I think that engineers should understand that, you know, as has been mentioned already, that the designers are not really designing things for themselves. They're trying to design it for someone else. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
So, you know, that's something that partially developers just say, oh, I don't like it, you know, I prefer like that. Yeah, right. I mean, I'm sorry, but, you know, we're trying.
Yeah, exactly. And then you would like, you would point at different pieces of software or literature or things like that. So like, yeah, actually there is, like, we have a lot of studies which shows that complexity in a application might be hard for people to pick it up easily. If someone is trying to defend their complexity and go like, well, maybe someone would sometimes, and like, yeah, maybe, but yeah, and then you would say like, yeah, but at the same time, we have a lot of people who for whom it's impossible to use this piece of software just because you're aiming at this like control freak audience.
I'll note you've essentially given a data-driven argument, you said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, there are data-driven...
Data-driven, but also data filtered by the target audience. You know.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it's one thing to say, like, I acknowledge your desire to have this complicated preference or whatever, but and I grant you that it will make things better for some class of users, but I have this belief based on data of some sort that on balance it's a bad idea because it makes things worse for this many new users or whatever.
And I think in general people like data, like really hard data. Like, okay, this is a really fine piece of software, but our user studies, which you can get all the data from, shows that it really gives people a hard time. So you should probably reconsider this interface.
So I think in this community, one of the problems is we say developers and users and designers all think differently. I think the problem we're facing right now is we don't know how to talk to each other. Like, we don't know what you guys need, and so we're, the community is putting forward these complaints. And the first problem is sometimes people don't know where. We try to go on IRC because we like IRC, but a lot of you guys aren't there. So we try to go on a mailing list, but you guys sometimes don't like mailing lists, and it's really hard to find people to talk to, the first step. And then once we find someone to talk to, we don't speak the same language. So we're trying to say, we don't like this, and then, I mean, some of the things you've said have been really useful, because I didn't necessarily know that you need, you know, the whole picture and target users and like a user type of, I don't know what you were saying, but it was like, it's unclear what information you need from us to frame our argument or you know, whatever behind things. So I think somehow setting up those expectations so we know what information is needed and what information we can provide, and then getting some sort of feedback on that. Because I think the problem right now is people are throwing things up against the wall and it's not being communicated properly. So people feel like it's being ignored when the fact is it's just not being communicated in a way that's constructive. Not anyone's fault, but just because we don't
It's almost a translation issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, definitely, to some extent, yeah, kind of explain like why you would do certain things. Like explain like, well, it's like a teaching process, I guess. Like actually teaching people about how a design workflow would work, basically. Like the concept of a user story, because like if someone doesn't know about that concept altogether, it would go like, yeah, I guess you guys just sat and like
made stuff up.
Yeah, you just made it up like because, and like I could make it up as well.
Yeah.
So like teaching people about
it's clearly a teaching progress, but also, you know, I mean, definitely requires some resources to do so. But definitely.
Yeah,
but also requires still a kind of distinction between the teacher and the student. When actually, in many cases, the developer thinks, you know, he knows the same way or more about design than the designer, to be honest. So, you know, still there is a distinction which actually is not particularly accepted, I guess, quite often from engineering.
Well, the interesting thing is, you'll often find that the developer could teach the designer things in development, but the designer can teach the developer things in design. And if you can say, it doesn't mean I'm better than you in all cases, but look at all these things I can teach you in design. It can be helpful.
So something that worries me is we have mentioned that a great solution to bridging the gap between, you know, perspectives is to have some sort of empirical data to refer to reasons and such. What worries me is that the people who are best positioned to acquire that data is, you know, people doing the user testing and the professional type of thing. And you know, I as a community user who have a very strong hunch that some design element is wrong, but don't have the resources to produce this data in a coherent way. Like,
I don't even really know how to explain. Like,
right.
That's the so in that sense, they are actually a user.
Yeah.
And users often have a very hard time understanding what they feel or why they feel. It's like they don't have the language to describe it. It's like being able to speak a language, but not having the tools to explain what you're doing when you're speaking, or how you break down those words.
User testing, you know, is definitely, you know, not something you can do, you know, improvise like that. So definitely need some tools.
Right.
We're already, you know, planning to. They already, Charlene already posted some post on the blog about, you know, how to do it.
Right.
But we're gonna create some toolkit.
So
then again, easily, you know, scale it to communities.
What's been a bit opaque in the past as well is the process by which you guys decide what to actually test in the user tests, right? So it might be quite useful if there was a sense of some feedback in like, okay, you know, we've heard you guys that this element is controversial, and so we're going to actually test that next, you know, next cycle, right? And we will, you know, put up some code designs and we'll test all three of them and see which one goes forward the best. And you know, that kind of thing would just be great, because you're no longer having an argument. You're you know, deferring to science, right? So
you still have to balance the data
Yeah.
Because there's also, you know, a vision and a global experience that, you know, some emotional you want to express in the software, not just the, you know.
There's all these things, but at least getting the sense that it's something that's being actively considered would quiet a lot of the complaints.
No, to be honest, I mean, we do qualitative tests, which, you know, which doesn't involve, you know, large amount of data, but more, you know, more details analysis. And to be honest, we definitely need, you know, also quantitative tests. So that's why I think this toolkit is very important, you know, and we enable the community to help us on that.
So we're still talking here sort of about the shell specifically, which, you know, one of the things we mentioned earlier in the week is that that's just a tiny piece of the whole. Now you all have been doing this week some design theaters. I don't know if you were participating in, where you're kind of walking through other applications and kind of helping people see like how you do user journeys and how they can also do that, and then helping them with one particular question for the application. How's that been going? What's been your experience this week?
I think that it's been going very well. I think that we had a variety of issues, and what we were trying to do was expose, so to speak, design thinking. Not so much resolve a problem, because the problems were huge. Some of them were huge. And we didn't have enough background information about users and user journeys to really resolve the problem. But what we were trying to achieve is to give people an idea of what the design thinking is. So when you want to, when you approach a design, how should you approach it? And I think that went very well. It's something that we intend to do in the future on a regular basis.
It seems to me like the kind of thing that really works face-to-face and wouldn't work very well over IRC, possibly. I'm trying to think of ways we can carry that forward. So certainly we can do it at the next UDS.
Because I think that the strength of an approach like that is you're working on something practical. So it's not, you know, a theory, but you see exactly with what you're working on, where to look for. And if you haven't looked there before, you learn to do next time.
Also gives a clear idea about abstraction. You need to have, you know, to bring yourself out of the, you know, of the context. You say, oh, actually, is it the right solution first of all? You know, maybe actually you should have done totally different, you know, from, you know, you should start totally different from scratch, to be honest. But, so that see things from, you know, from outside and say, actually, what I'm trying to achieve, what's the aim for the user, you know, why are you using it, do they need it, you know, in the first place, you know, not just, you know, with blue or red, no, that's not really, you know, what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that's like far too late in the whole question, the whole process of user experiences.
So most of the cases, especially last session, was just about, you know, going backwards and understanding, you know, what they're trying to achieve with this software. You know,
giving them questions to ask themselves and how to move.
Yeah, also giving the tools to, you know, which kind of question to ask, what kinds of people to ask, you know, try to define a target, you know, simple things, but actually definitely helps to understand how, you know, things can be looked.
Yeah, and also what was interesting in the sessions was that sometimes some technical questions were perceived as being design questions. Like the possibilities of the technologies were seen as design questions. When, you know, it should be all based, coming from the users and what the users needs to do. Which was maybe something about the design thinking that we need to communicate.
So is this design theater something that could be done on a video cast, maybe? With like a...
Maybe, like a Google Hangout?
Something like that, because Martin Owens, who's a Dr. MO in there, he's we have these community weeks and things in Ubuntu Classroom, which are IRC-based events, but he's actually done a couple where he takes everyone out of IRC and tosses up a video chat, and he'll do like a big demo of Inkscape or something.
He uses either Ustream or Livestream, I'm not sure.
Yeah, he uses one of those streaming services, but it's part of like our weeks that we do or events that we do, so everyone's in IRC anyway, and then we pull them off into this other site, and he's had really good success with them, so if that's a way that might be useful.
Possibly. And you all do weekly video calls. I mean, most of the designers are based in the office, but you do weekly video calls remotely to the Isle of Man. So
sometimes daily.
How do you manage in this case to share the designs? Does it work sharing designs that way remotely? Or is that
we use computer, we connect computer.
So you project remotely and talk
so
about
share
it.
screen sharing eventually. Presenting concepts, stuff like that.
Because I'm wondering if, so 6 months seems like a long time before we did another design theater. If we could do like one app every 2 months or something like that, just as a way of kind of having a conversation.
The biggest difference that would be, I guess, for something like you're proposing is the preparation for it. Because, in this case, there wasn't really preparation. People came there, we don't even know really what was the scope of the argument. So it would be good to select and to find something, in terms of size, manageable, and maybe apply, which kind of approach we would take for different examples. So it can be probably a good idea in terms of examples, so we can prepare and maybe select better cases for the next UDS. So you could propose some examples, some approaches that we, some suggestions we took. So maybe next time people have more idea about, how to get prepared, I guess, and have a better scope for the discussion.
Yeah. Do you think it would?
I think we don't want we don't want to be in a position to teaching people to do software. I mean, there are software design teams there as well. So I don't think it's the right position to be there.
I mean, this is kind of what the idea of having a community team around was to help. To make it so it's not just random people coming at you who have no design experience, but like that you would have designers that you could talk to.
Yeah, I think we need to define a bit better, which kind of audience, which kind of discussion we want to have.
I think if we could find a couple of community volunteer designers, and I have no idea how to find them.
They just show up at some point and just rocks. But it's hard.
That's what we thought 5-6 years ago.
They didn't come.
But it's very, very hard. I mean, like, would you do some kind of outreach program to like user experience, university courses, shit like that? Would it, the design schools or like something? I mean, like, how do you get like contributors in general?
He actually does a lot of design stuff, Martin, Gramo. He's volunteering.
Cool.
I think you've said quite clearly that designers can build up a reputation, but I think developers need to build up a reputation for being open to UX as well.
I mean, like, in general, I mean, like, the free software community is all about building reputation. That's how you get things done.
But designers it's not visible to designers, because I'm fairly new to open source, and it's not visible. How do I get involved? I don't know, they're just big scary developers.
Oh, so okay, and you speak different languages and stuff like that. But yeah, that's definitely, I want to know that too, like, because up until now it's just been pure luck. So I was thinking about another, coming back to data points and allowing people to give feedback in a good way on design issues. So one thing that the Firefox project has been doing, and we're doing this in Thunderbird too now, is that we need more data on how our user interfaces are used by our current user base. So what they did in Firefox when they moved away on Windows, when they moved away from the big menus to just the Firefox button, they needed some data on, like, well, exactly what menu items do people use And I mean, like, one way they could have done this is like ask the community, like, well, guys, how do you use your menus? What menu items do you use? And yeah, that would have been not so good about that discussion. Like having like 1,000 people trying to come up with what menu items in a web browser are important. So they came up with Test Pilots, which is a application that you can, or it's an add-on. So you install it, and they do certain studies on parts of the interface, and then they figure out, like, so out of a proportion of, like, I don't know, like 10,000 people, how many people use these menu items, which was really interesting, because like that means the community can actually help with design without having like the very opinionated things that could get in the way, because it's like it's just anonymous data, which I find more interesting than like blog posts and mailing lists from individual people telling you their story.
You're building the feedback mechanism right into the application.
Yes, exactly.
Has anyone ever tried building a feedback mechanism?
It's analytics.
The shell.
It's analytics. Yes.
Right.
Which will help your decisions on what you can do about the.
It would be interesting to have something like this, and not just in the shell and Unity and all that, but in any application, you know, actual easy to install, like just click the optional checkbox, and now whenever I do anything with the dash, it tells you more or less what I did. And we can discover if, you know, half the time I click one button and I never ever click another, and we can, you know.
Yeah. So like,
to some extent, yeah. I will know, to some extent we already collect this data with Zeitgeist and whatnot for actually just using the operating system. It shouldn't be too hard to make that anonymous and publishable in some fashion. I don't.
Yeah, and I mean, like it's you need to be very certain about privacy and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure, like, and Blake needs to correct me, but the test pilot data is public to everyone, right?
The aggregate data
yes.
is published to everyone.
Yeah. So then, like, you could, like, we took this decision based on this piece of data, and everyone can go and look at the data, basically.
This is already in the radar.
Yeah, and I feel like Banshee does something similar as well. And of course, like, the information will still be slightly skewed, because you would only have more passionate people actually signing up. Yeah. Unless you would like turn it on for your mom or whatever.
First of all, opt-in selection.
Yeah.
Second, also, you know, if you try to target someone which actually, you know, is not using it yet, you need to interpret them.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you still get better data than like just angry blog posts, because people are always happy when people are happy, they are silent.
And so, to be fair, it's not a strictly bad thing to skew the data slightly to the types of people that might complain. So, I mean, maybe in terms of the actual user, but this is sort of the effect of what's happening, right? It is, so in a sense, voting by
as I say, it's in the radar. Actually, we good if community can help, you know, with the third-party applications, or, you know, on other solution. For instance, there was a person who came for the design theater yesterday, and you know, there was this application which was quite difficult to use, and they say, you know, ask how many. So there was a link to the website, and ask how many people come to this website. You know, how many people are using it. You know, you didn't have any data, zero.
Yeah.
I say, how do you know if people are looking for help, or do you know if people need help, or do you know that? I mean, so that's a simple thing. If you put Google Analytics on your website, you will know if people come to the help page. You know. I mean, how many people has installed it? So there's some data you can collect one way or another. But we're definitely looking into, you know, a better framework for the whole shell and everything.
I want to answer some questions on RCR. So Dr. Mo said, like, I probably said it already, but it's still self-selected data, but it's better than what we have now. Because now it's very, very, very self-selected. Because the people who select themselves are able to sign up for a mailing list and stuff like that. And really, so democracy is not the best system, but it's the best one we came up with, you know. And then like what would it be built into? So right now, the Banshee feedback is obviously built into Banshee, and the Thunderbird and Firefox data collection stuff are built into those applications. So I don't know, like something generic, so it would be reusable for as many pieces as possible.
So whoever would build this tool for, say, Unity, could hook into the Zeitgeist and whatnot. That would not be usable in each app, but it would certainly be a start. There's a, it's not a trivial problem, but I think you can have a very rough solution that gives you 90% of the way there. So.
Can someone who's on IRC and also on the notes copy and paste B. Winton's link into the notes from that link from IRC into the notes?
Oh yeah, the UX keywords. Yeah, we've been talking about that before. I know I've definitely talked with Ivanka about that. Yeah, it would probably stay there. But so the UX keyword idea is that you have some more strict heuristics. So this is something that Alex Fauberg from Mozilla came up with. So so in the case that you can mark a bug in the Mozilla Bugzilla as a crasher, and everyone knows like this is not good stuff, like this is, but there is no good way to say when a issue have several pieces of difficulties with its user interface. Like, is it like very hard to discover? Is the wording you're using very geeky? Is it like, well, a bunch of things basically, or like hard, like bad accessibility. I don't have them all in my head, I'm afraid. But basically it's just some heuristics basically, and I mean like definitely heuristics have to balance between each other. So I mean like everything could be very discoverable. But then it would also be overwhelming because you would have like every action on the very first screen of the application. But it's definitely something that's interesting to look into because.
But is that applied to bugs or applied to features? I mean.
Well, mainly bugs, but you can definitely use them for features too. But it's I think like mainly what you try to do is to introduce some proper wording to it, so like people have a good way to discuss around different things rather than saying like I want this or like I want this, but rather said like okay, we can both agree that it's a problem of discoverability. But maybe it's worth it in this case, and then you could actually use like proper wording when discussing design issues, which everyone would like understand what you are talking about. So do you have the link up somewhere?
Yeah, posted it in for us.
Yeah. So we haven't made like a lot of use in Mozilla Bugzilla of these yet, but it's definitely something that one could look into because it allows you to talk about design issues in a more civilized way,
Okay. Yeah,
basically, instead of like I think and I think and I think and I think, you know.
That sounds really useful.
Hopefully, yeah.
So I think the session ends in like 12 minutes.
And then lunch.
So I think to summarize since we want to do action items for the next cycle, to summarize where I think we are and then correct me if I get off a little bit. So after UDS, we're going to have the designers sort of do a blog post on the idea that we've talked about here at UDS. We're going to start circulating that around all the community news channels, make sure it gets broad attention. And then we have actually found some designers who are interested in participating. Dr. Mo, you can tell me if I'm volunteering you for something you didn't mean to volunteer for. But so I think the next step after we talk about it publicly is then to sit down with them and work on, okay, how can we form a team for you to work together on a particular project. We'll kind of call it a pilot project of a community design team working on one of the user stories that we talked about earlier in the week. We haven't really identified one yet, and part of it's going to depend on their interests. Like, if they're entirely not interested in I don't know, audio or home media, then that's not going to be the design project they're going to want to work on first. So then the design team has volunteered some time to collaborate with the community designers, you know, to kind of get them started and help kind of communicate some of the process that they've already been using. So that'll give us, thumbs up from Dr. Mo, excellent. That'll give us a good sort of communication channel over the next cycle. And I think our goal for this cycle then would be to identify one, whether it's user journey or one user experience channel, and say at the end of the 6 months we have finished one thing. So we'll make it a small scoped project that we know we can finish in 6 months. And then at the end of the 6 months so at the next UDS we'd sit back and say, okay, how did this collaboration go between the community team and the folks that are working on Unity, and how much progress did we make, and could we start maybe a second user design team on a different story in the next cycle. Does that sound about right to people?
Sure.
Excellent. I need to know how to get in touch with Dr. Mo, but I bet you can help us there.
Dr. Mo at ubuntu.com. That's good.
Excellent.
Okay. Just call into the wind anytime.
He's always listening.
I think that pretty much wraps it up. All right. Thank you, everybody. This was fun.